panel discussion really is to discuss the different ecosystems in different parts of the world and different regions. My name is Joe Camilleri. I'm a partner with PwC in Malta. I've been with the firm for 35 years. I joined when I was 5 years old, by the way, okay? My principal area of responsibility is in financial services. I head the asset management team in PwC Malta, and private equity and other asset management initiatives. But I also head, together with another partner in the firm, an initiative that PwC launched called the Million Euro Fund, where we offer 1 million euros of pro bono services to startups in Malta, and we've had an enormous success with that over the past few years. I don't need to introduce the panelists because you've all met them over the course of the last couple of days. I'd just like to start the discussion perhaps looking at regions from about 36,000 feet high, sort of, on the overall discussion. So my first question is that it's generally felt that no country or region has ever been able to muster nearly the same quantity or quality of startups and corresponding venture capital as Silicon Valley, although Europe and China have made great strides forward. Why do you think this is the case? Tucci, I'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I remember when I first moved to Silicon Valley 5 years ago, it was just like being there was just amazing. You would just walk into any coffee shop and you would hear next to you would hear people talking about building like satellite systems that would look at the mineral in the earth to help farmers, or you would go to another coffee shop, next to you would be sitting another person working on a genius idea. I think the density of people working in tech is something that is very hard to replicate, because we hear it from, like, my company, we have a presence in like 41 countries, and every country I go to, they're like, how do we become the next Silicon Valley? Or you hear about these cities, we want to become the Silicon Valley of the Middle East, we want to become the Silicon Valley of Asia. That's impossible to do. And there are people that think that it's maybe the engineering talent that put a lot of money in raising more engineers. Some people think it's the universities in the Bay Area. We have Berkeley, we have Stanford, but then you look at the research triangle in North Carolina, they have actually some of the highest numbers of PhDs and all these educational platforms and an amazing R&D initiatives. They cannot become the next Silicon Valley. So I think two things are very key in Silicon Valley. Again, one of them is the density of people that work in tech. And second of all, it's really like a giving back culture. When I moved there for the first time 5 years ago, I did not know anyone, and every single meeting I took, I came out with like 3 different like outcomes and doors opening for me. People just want to help you without any expectations, and because some other people did the same to those people years ago. So it's just this continuous cycle of giving back and helping others.
Yeah. Mike?
Does the mic work? So it doesn't work. Or
Yeah,
you hear me? It
I
works?
think it is.
So I agree, but I think the problem is that everybody wants to become the Silicon Valley. It's like we want to become the Silicon Valley for, and I think that's the wrong statement. I don't think you should try to be the Silicon Valley for. I think what Silicon Valley has managed to do is absolutely unique, and no ecosystem will be able to replicate this anytime soon. Just for the sheer amount of talent, the experience that's come out of the Silicon Valley at a large scale. I mean, people that have built companies to such a large scale that the executives coming out of there know how to scale companies to thousands and thousands of employees, and we lack that experience in Europe. The universities, the sheer amount of venture capital concentrated in one street, Sandal Road. I don't think you can replicate this. What I do think is you should do something different. And I think that's a bit of a problem where you look at other ecosystems, they're copying too much. They're looking what's happening in Silicon Valley, US, or Europe, but like everybody's just trying to copy those models and implement them for their city, for their country. And I would love to see people trying to do something slightly different, taking a concept, thinking, how does it work for our culture? How does it work for our city? And how can we market this in a unique way and do it differently?
Yeah.
And I think Berlin has done some very good stuff there. I think Stockholm is unique. I mean, it's amazing if you look at what's coming out of Sweden, you know, if you look at the population. And I think these are models that are interesting to look at and also figure out how can we, you know, learn from this and do something different in our country.
Absolutely.
And I think those that were successful at doing that were completely unique in their own cases, and they did not necessarily try to replicate Silicon Valley. And same with Israel, same with Chile.
Absolutely. Didan, do you have any further comments, perhaps?
I think I'm a bit more optimistic. I really think everybody will get there. We all will get there. It's just that some started earlier and had the ingredients, the osmosis to put it together. I mean, Eisenhower actually said our semiconductor industry had better be a bit more competitive. And that was ages ago. And I was in Bucharest just this weekend. Amazing. But it's like decades after that, right? So it will get there, but I totally agree with both of you, especially Mike, in the sense that each ecosystem is different. The meaning of entrepreneurship is different in Middle East than it can ever be in the States. It's as simple as that. So because of cultural, political challenges and opportunities, etc. But it's all good. We are going in the fantastic direction.
So focusing on the particular regions, Dean, I'd like to ask this question to you, and then the others would comment. There's no doubt that there's an interconnected global sort of landscape now forming. It's not just Silicon Valley, as we've heard, it's all over the world. Can you just briefly describe the sort of infrastructure ecosystem available in the regions you work with, you work in? So government, startup culture, ease of setting up business, venture capital mentality and stuff like that. So we start with you sort of in the Middle East and different Middle East, and then move on to the sort of ecosystems in the particular areas you work in.
So I'll try not to repeat what I'd said earlier. The ecosystems in the Middle East are still very nascent. There might be some variations of one country slightly being ahead of the other, but I think as a whole, the entire ecosystem is still very early on. There are not enough players, and I think that remains to be the number one, which, referring back to what Tucci was saying, the Silicon Valley the biggest component of it is that there's so many of them, and it's the concentration of it. And that's why it's so special. It's not fragmented, they're not trying to spread it, and it never started as an element of trying to empower anything as much as it is. It really was market dynamics that brought everyone, and that concentration of the VCs, the startup accelerators, and the university plays a part in it, that made it very special. We're still very far ahead from anything. But we're getting there. The players are coming in. The infrastructure is very difficult. Setting up a company I could set up an Egyptian company, or Egyptian entrepreneurs can set up a company in Delaware in literally 2 days. It takes 6 months in Egypt. Yeah. That is a huge barrier that will remain to be a bottleneck for the growth of the ecosystem for as long as it exists. Having said that, in every single government now, a big part of the mandate is to try to nourish the entrepreneurship spirit in the ecosystem. It's trying. There's some strides that have been done, but still not as much as we would like to see. And the funding is starting to come in.
Mike, Berlin?
Berlin. I think what Berlin managed to build is incredible, honestly. I mean, if you look at how young that ecosystem is, it's incredible how fast it's grown. Last year, 2 billion in venture capital was invested in Berlin-based startups, compared to London, which 1.7 billion. That's amazing. I mean, Berlin's still not there. London is much, much more mature, but it's a sign that it's growing very, very fast. And there's a lot of things happening. I think what they managed to do very well is changing, or using the creative industry, and then using tech and bringing them together, and it's kind of like low cost, a bit edgy, it's a cool city, and market this very, very well. Yeah. It's attracted a lot of startups also who are bootstrapping to come to Berlin, because, just living in Berlin compared to London makes a huge difference, not to mention Silicon Valley. Yeah. So it's a very, very fast-growing ecosystem. But what I don't believe in, I don't believe in ecosystems that can grow to the extent that you have everything, right? So if we take Silicon Valley as the most complete ecosystem out there, I don't really believe it's achievable anymore to build this very, very mature ecosystems that kind of have everything. Even Silicon Valley doesn't really have it, right? The financial industry, etc. It's more concentrated in New York. And I really believe we should focus much, much more on using certain strength in cities, market them, and then work together. So I would love to see actually, I mean, if London really like pushes the FinTech, you know, that all those cities, like even Tallinn, like, you know, cybersecurity, like Tel Aviv is very, very good at cybersecurity. Like pushing those themes much, much more, and then having entrepreneurs travel between those cities, you know, to go to the best hubs and work together.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that more, like compared to everybody fighting for the same thing, like Berlin now wanting to go into FinTech.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more about, I think, finding the intersection of what these cities are really good at and innovation. As you were saying, like with London, it's finance, so FinTech is a no-brainer, and cybersecurity with Estonia after what happened with Russia, etc. So just finding that strength or that weakness and turn it into a strength afterwards, and just invest in the intersection of technology.
But ecosystems also develop in a lot more subtle. It isn't directed by government. I think, again, I know we shouldn't all, I've always said I don't want to be Silicon Valley. We should try to veer away from that goal that we all want to do. But Silicon Valley was pure market dynamics. People came, there wasn't direction, there wasn't an element, and it grew because it was just supply and demand. And the other thing is that we always forget that at the end of the day, we're not mandated by necessarily what's the strength of the government or the country as much as it is what the market wants, because you're providing products for the market. And I think I would personally think that this is one of the things that we don't pay much attention, and I think is lacking in the entrepreneurship scene in the Middle East, is that we're still trying to create Western products rather than really look at what our markets are lacking. And there's so much opportunity to innovate within the Middle East, but that's still untapped. And I think that will be the next wave, and the next generation of entrepreneurship is going to happen in the Middle East, of trying to do entrepreneurship that fits us. They're not just replicas.
Dido, just going on to what Mike commented, do you feel that different regions, countries compete for talent, for resources, and therefore, for example, is Europe fragmented because you have sort of London competing with Berlin, competing with Stockholm and Israel? So is there a competition rather than sort of cooperation to compete for?
I think there is more cooperation. The bigger the pie, the better. But in very specific high-tech technologies or focus areas, obviously there's a competition for engineering talent, especially because they are rare. But hopefully we will overcome those as well. You know. For London, to answer your original question, I think it's a fascinating ecosystem, of course. It's kind of a good role model for all of Europe. If we start with there are 5 or 6 ingredients for any successful ecosystem. So it's, in my humble opinion, it starts with the government, and they laid out the fantastic incentives for both investors and entrepreneurs and tech talent, visa schemes and this and that. And I'm not going to talk about Brexit, otherwise I could cry. But the government did the right things. The investor community is also amazing. The angel networks, they really work. The VC, private, it's all there, obviously. The money is there. Technical talent is not enough in London, but it was able to get at least from the rest of Europe. And of course, the entrepreneurial role models, the mentors are there. I mean, that's extremely important for people to learn from and help each other. So we are fortunate in that sense,
We're almost out of time, but I just wanted to ask my last question before we wrap up. I mean, Malta, over the last 20 or 30 years, launched itself as a financial services center of repute. So we were a hub for financial services companies in asset management and banking and captive insurance, and we've done pretty well for various reasons without sort of going into it. What would you recommend? What does Malta need to do to replicate what it did in the financial services industry, to launch itself now as the startup hub of choice in the Mediterranean? What would you recommend for policymakers, for government, for industry? What would it take you to start recommending Malta as the location of choice?
Start
Anyone?
with me? Sure. I really believe in ecosystems, especially recent ones that are growing. It starts with the government, the policies, the incentives for both the investor community, the technical talent, and entrepreneurs, both in terms of tax and visa schemes, etc. You have this amazing location and advantages and English, as we mentioned. It's just combining all those, turning all those advantages and sparking it. Another thing I would recommend is to really connect with the best-in-class examples in the world. Singapore, Santiago, Tel Aviv, Nordics, Stockholm in particular. I mean, these are amazing, amazing examples outside Silicon Valley that are making it work, really putting in the right ingredients and connecting the dots. I would say just join forces.
Let's go in order. Tuche, any advice you can give us?
I totally agree with Didem. Just looking at the best practices around the world, what Chile did. Chile's biggest problem was there were no local entrepreneurs. So to solve that problem, they just started giving away grants to talented foreign entrepreneurs. And when all of a sudden all these foreign entrepreneurs came to Santiago, it spread the entrepreneurial vibe to the local people. And maybe 5 years ago, Startup Chile did not have any local companies in their programs. Now half of the batches are local entrepreneurs. So there are amazing examples out there on the best practices. So just studying them really well and kind of getting the best ones.
Mike?
So 3 things. First of all, and I think we mostly agree government has a big role to play. Actually, most people I talk to always say government shouldn't be involved. I absolutely disagree. Typically, everybody agrees that they should take away obstacles. I go much further and say the government should, if done well, be an ambassador. They should go out there. They should also promote. There should be someone who really is kind of marketing this. And I think in order to market, you have to be controversial. And frankly, most countries are not willing to do this.
Yeah.
So Estonia has been willing to do this to some extent, which has paid off very well. Netherlands now is pushing very, very hard. So it was Nelly Cruz, ex-European Commissioner, who has pushed the Startup Delta program, very, very successful so far. At least there's a lot of marketing spillover effect. And now it's a prince who's taking over the ownership. So these are leading kind of role models who are also pushing this internationally. I think this is massively important. And then do things different to the extent of don't just build another accelerator, think about something new, whatever that is, or just give it a spin, right? Do validator, market this in a nice way, and do it theme-based. If it's gaming, then focus on gaming, call out gaming startups to come over. FinTech, then focus on this. And the last part is build very, very strong bridges to a few key ecosystems. Whatever those are, it could be US, it could also be Europe, it could be London, Berlin. Build those bridges and make sure you have very strong partners so entrepreneurs can go, travel forth and back, and benefit from a bigger market.
That's interesting. Dina, anything?
I think there's very little left to add after what's been said. I think I completely agree with everything that's been said. Connections are very important. Malta is very strategic. London offers a lot, but a place like London offers a lot, but Malta has an already competitive advantage of being way cheaper and a lot more connected and central. That should be key. And from my experience, ask any entrepreneur what is it they would like. And it's really, really very simple. I want a quiet place, very high-speed internet, and I don't want someone to get in my way. I just want to I want to sit and code and create my product. And those are very easy to create. We can sit and go out and try to get very creative as to how to do things, but genuinely just ask an entrepreneur, and it's as simple as that. Their demands, they work despite everything, in spite of everything. So just make it easy for them to come and set up.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have time for questions from the audience, unfortunately, but I'm sure each of the panelists and I will be available for a chat over coffee if anyone wishes to ask any further questions. I found it very interesting. Thank you very much. I hope you did too. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for their insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.